Morning everyone, just out for my daily exercise. Look at that. I'm definitely going to have to let Mrs P loose with the scissors today. Can't hold out much longer. Anyway, look, the reason I'm out for a run, the reason I'm trying to stay fit is because, and this probably goes for most of us, our normal routine is out the window, isn't it? I'm normally, in my normal daily life, as many of you know, I'm flat out busy. I'm always running around, travelling a lot. That means it's energetic, it's frantic, it's how I love it. You know, I wouldn't have it any other way, but that's all stops. Normally when I'm travelling, I do a lot of exercise. I go for runs wherever I can, in whichever city I end up being in, because I think it's a great way to explore as well as keep fit. But all of that has ground to a halt immediately, without any notice. And so I'm doing this running, I'm trying to stay fit and keep the exercise routine going, or build in a new exercise routine to stay sharp, so that I don't kind of, slip back to being unfit again. That's the reasoning behind it. And all of that got me thinking about what else has happened whilst the world has ground to a halt, particularly within the world of Formula One. Factories are closing, everything has literally stopped, and Formula One is pretty much the same as me. It's always going at 100 miles an hour. There's always stuff happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And yet, right now, it just stopped. So what could the effects of that be? I think some of those might be less obvious than some others. I mean, none of us know how long this could potentially go on for, but even on the most basic level of shutting the doors of your factory and having everybody walk away from it for what could be months on end could pose its own challenges just there. I mean, imagine just locking the doors to your own house, leaving and not coming back for months. Some things will not look quite the same as when you first left it. Things will perish. Not everything's geared up to be for long-term storage inside a Formula One operation. There is all sorts of chemicals and materials that are normally being used on a regular basis, are normally very short-term consumable items that right now might have to stay in one place for months on end. Heating systems, air conditioning systems, all of these kind of systems that run wind tunnels and cooling systems, they all need regular maintenance. Are they going to be able to get it? Of course, under the normal summer Formula One shutdown period, where the factories all close for 2 weeks in the summer, they're not entirely empty. Under those circumstances, you are allowed to carry out maintenance on all of those parts of the factory that require it, because everybody who's related to car performance is not there. This time around, because of government lockdowns and people being unable to travel and go to work, that's not an option anymore. Of course, when it comes to car development, that's also going to be hugely hit. The early part of 2020 was when most of the development of this year's cars was due to happen, so that at some point after that, the big switchover of resources could move over to the 2021 cars, which are currently being designed. That, of course, has all changed. The 2021 cars are now pushed back to 2022, which means the 2020 cars will have to race on into 2021. Now, there's only so much development that can happen remotely. People are unable to travel into their factories. Countries are on lockdown, as I say. But the thinking, of course, never stops. Designers are always coming up with ideas. These processes, the creative processes, are always happening. Those ideas can be shared among the regular groups of designers and discussed and developed in that sense. What we can't do, though, is get into the factories and use the equipment and the systems that we would normally use to develop these cars in a much more efficient, much more productive way. Somebody said to me recently, can teams still use their complex and advanced CFD systems, the complicated simulation tooling that's within a Formula One factory that allows these ideas to be evaluated so quickly and tested in the virtual world? Can they do that remotely? And there's two answers to that. Of course, what's happened in this shutdown is that the summer shutdown has been moved now to now, hasn't it? Before the end of April, all of the teams are having to take at least a 3-week, what is now a mandatory shutdown. Now, during that, the summer shutdown rules apply, which mean you're not allowed to work on the cars, you're not allowed to continue development, you're not allowed to do anything related to car performance. But at some point, that official Formula One shutdown will end. But what's highly likely is that still the local governments, local territories will still be on lockdown, and still Formula One teams are not able to get into their factories. In that situation, potentially there is an opportunity to still be able to run the systems in the factory remotely. You know, you could be operating from home, running systems into the really high-powered simulation tools that are inside the factory, sending in that instruction to run the sim, and then you'll get the results back remotely to your terminal from wherever you are. So yes, at that point, we can still utilise some of the equipment, some of the resource that a Formula One team has, and access it away from the factories. Even things like the team's motorhomes, which under normal circumstances right now would be furiously being renovated and prepared, ready for the start of the European season when they get used again. Well, that's all ground to a halt as well. And yeah, all right, we may not end up having a European season this year, but it's just another thing that's ground to a halt. And the problem with all of that is that these workflows are almost military grade spec'd out. So these procedures and schedules are done in almost military fashion in Formula One operations. That's how the sport works. So if you stop everything on one particular day and then come back maybe 6 months later, how smooth is that transition going to be on every single operation? The hundreds, if not thousands of operation happening in any team, to have a sudden stop and not pick it up again for maybe 6 months or even longer, there's huge potential for things to go wrong, or at the very least, not be smooth or efficient. Going on to a podcast today, the Motormouth podcast, to talk about all things Formula One. So that should be quite fun. I don't know whereabouts you can listen to it when it is done, but of course, you'll be the first to know. Hello guys, can you hear me? Well, that podcast was an awful lot of fun to do. I hope you'll really enjoy it. So I will shout out when it's due to be uploaded. I think maybe the end of this week, maybe beginning of next. But we've talked about all sorts of things from both my time in Formula One, but loads of other subjects around F1 as well. So maybe that'll be a nice way to pass some time when that's finally uploaded. So yeah, keep an eye on the channel. I'll let you know when it is. But look, before that, I was talking about some of the biggest challenges that Formula One teams might have and the industry might have through this period of time. But mostly I was talking about technical and operational challenges. But for my money, the biggest challenge of all, and this is not Formula One specific, the biggest challenge that everybody has, the biggest problem that everybody has, is the human one right now. Getting humans through this really difficult spell. It's often a much overlooked side of F1, isn't it? The human side, because we focus so much on the technical side of the cars and what we do and the technical brilliance, the entertainment side. It's very easy sometimes to forget that the whole thing is run by humans, and human performance plays a huge part in absolutely everything. I mean, the obvious one is the drivers, because they're the heroes that we build up to be the centre point of everything we do. And for them, you know, well, they've all got home simulators that can really help keep them sharp, keep them on their toes. Yeah, it's not the same thing, but at least they've got something that keeps them active, keeps their mind active, keeps that competitive spirit going, and keeps them somehow racing. What it obviously can't do is replicate the G-forces, the experience of being inside a Formula One car. And we see this every time we get back to pre-season testing at the start of every season. Day one is brutal. On a driver's neck, for example, they get to the end of day one, they can hardly hold their neck up. They are always a little bit rusty on the first day. I know that from experience. It takes them a while to build back up again, to get into the groove and get back into the swing of being a Formula One driver and being on a racetrack in a competitive environment. You can't replicate that necessarily in any simulator. So could we end up having to have a pre-season test, which could come at a strange time of the year just to get not just the drivers, but everybody back into the swing of things before we eventually go racing again? To me, that would probably be the sensible option if indeed we do get back to a racetrack in 2020. But much more than the drivers, Formula One is an operation run by thousands and thousands of people. People highly skilled in whatever field it is within the industry that they're working in. And that's everybody from the team management, from the engineers, the truck drivers, the mechanics themselves, the physios, the people that run the catering operations for each of these teams, the FIA, the stewards at any Grand Prix. All of these people, thousands and thousands of them, that have to be at the very top of their game when it matters on a Grand Prix weekend, have suddenly got a period of time, an indeterminate period of time, when they are literally not doing any of those things. As well as that, don't forget Formula One teams are just that, they're teams. They are high-performing teams, tight-knit teams that spend their entire life, more or less, on the road with each other, working closely with each other, on top of each other, integrated perfectly to do what a Formula One needs to do best. That team has been disbanded now and physically cannot see each other until we're all free to mingle again whenever that may be. That's going to have an impact on team dynamic, team performance. And what about pit stops? There's literally no physical way that you can practice or stay sharp at pit stops when we've all been disbanded and separated like this, when we've got to practice this social distancing. It's one of those things that's literally impossible. And those are all things that could take time. In the build up to a season, pit stop practice, of course, starts months ahead of that. We are practicing pretty much every day, every single week, for weeks and weeks and weeks, so that when we get to go racing, everybody's sharp, everybody's at the top of the game again. Well, when we finally lift restrictions and allow us to go racing again, they're going to want to get racing underway as quickly as possible. Teams are going to have to get up to speed very, very quickly. And yeah, all right, it might be like falling off a bike. You jump straight back on, you pick it up again. It's not like we've got to teach these things to people. But these things become better and better, smoother, more integrated, more seamless, which is what a Formula One pit stop needs to be. The more and more you're able to do it, the more and more you practice. If we don't manage to get racing happening again in 2020, entirely possible. There could be so many changes to a Formula One team by the time we do get going again. There's so many drivers out of contract right now. We could end up with different drivers in your team next time we end up back at a racetrack. That has a huge amount of challenges just in itself. Getting to know that person, understanding that person. A new engineer might be working with that person. The teammates will all have to bond again. There could be people, staff members within the team that had always planned for this to be their last year in Formula One. Maybe they were going into retirement. Maybe they wanted to go off and do something else. They'd had enough of the travel or whatever else. That happens. It happened to me. So it could be that next time we do go racing, your team structure even looks quite different. Now look, these are all challenges. Some of them quite significant, others less so. But the thing about Formula One teams is that they are very, very good at overcoming challenges. I talked about this in a video recently. It's one of the things that makes Formula One as an industry stand out against many others, in my opinion. We have challenges thrown at us every week, and yet we deal with them. We don't just survive them, we deal with them and turn them into opportunities to make us better and make us stronger. And I have no doubt that Formula One as an industry and Formula One teams as individual organisations have the potential to come out of this leaner, more efficient and potentially better as well. But it's definitely going to be an interesting process. And it's not even something that we can plan for that well right now because things are changing on an almost daily, if not hourly basis. Everybody right now behind the scenes is having to look at what's happening, look at the advice coming in, trying to make some kind of vague predictions. Formula One themselves even yesterday sent out a press release from Chase Carey saying that he was hoping they'd get 15 to 18 races done this year. That's a pie in the sky idea. I love it because, we'd all love to see that. But how can anybody predict that right now? We have absolutely no idea when we'll get to go racing again, and when we finally do, what state the teams, the circuits, the travel industry, the hotel business, we have no idea what any of that will look like when all of this is through. So there's no way we can make predictions. All we can do is do our best to manage the situation right now, look after our staff as a Formula One team, look after each other, and be ready when we can go racing again, when we can start to prepare again and do what we in Formula One do best, which is manage that change, be as prepared as we can, and ultimately find the performance in whatever situation is thrown up in front of us. Right, thanks for watching, guys. That's it for today. I'm going to go and try and convince Mrs. P to tackle this with a pair of scissors. Let's hope it comes out all right. I'm sure you'll tell me either way tomorrow. But look after each other, guys. Stay safe, and hopefully I'll be back tomorrow with something a little bit different. Ta-da.